Welcome to the front yard. My name is Daly and this is Melissa. And we're continuing our discussions about the sweetness of a friend is better than self-counsel. And this is our second week into this subject matter, and it's been very intriguing. Hope you've read our posts on Monday and Wednesday. And we're glad you've decided to be here with us.
Yes, I'm so glad to jump back into the conversation. I feel like we're kind of taking a turn from where we were last week when we talked about the word sweet and just kind of looking at the basis of friendship and how it can be a little more, have more depth. And today, in reading some of your words daily, I think one of the things that stuck out to me was this word of congruency, of being the same person all the time in your thoughts, in your heart, in your actions, in your social media portrayal, right? Like there's something about that too. And I know for me, I desire to be, it doesn't always work, right? Like you still have, there's still sin, there's still selfish motive, there's still like things you have to filter. But I think stepping into, I desire to be the same person to all the people in my life and not have hidden places where I'm not congruent.
Right. And I think that's hard. I think it's hard, but I also think it comes like it's one of those muscles that the more you use it, the better you get at it. And you feel the friction when you're not that way. And I think that the hardest part of it is that you don't realize that it's really something that is like an inner work of doing these things, of keeping yourself together, really, and not in a way that's pretentious, like I have to appear like I have it all together, right, or like I'm the real deal, but more so just, do I know that I know what I believe and why I believe it, and can I back that up with my actions and my words?
Well, I know I've learned a lot in our friendship that I did not know. And so one of the things is I did not know that I did not know who I was. And so I think there's a place of, this is what I like, this is who I am a mom, I am a wife, I love Jesus. And it took a lot of self-reflective solitude, quiet, for me to figure out, I wonder why I respond that way when this happens. What is the underlying issue that I always respond in a certain way to this friend or to this response or to this? Why do I feel angry? Or why do I wouldn't even said that I had many emotions because I was not aware of the inner part of myself. And so I think stepping into friendship and wanting to be exposed and vulnerable, you have to first sit with yourself and know who you are before you can want somebody else to know who you are.
Right. And I think part of that is a lot of people, I think, are in that same space. Yeah. Like I think they find themselves very, like they think they are being all of who they are, and yet there's these untapped places, and they've just followed a method or a role that has worked so far.
Well, and in Christianity, especially, there's this, I don't know, Proverbs 31 women, or there's this set idea of what we think that should look like. And if we feel something that it is not congruent with what our ideal, then we just displace it. Like, that has to be weeded out because I am supposed to be this because I love Jesus. And I think we miss the healing places, or the places of sin exposure, the places that we can say, hey, I actually don't feel like this, but I desire that someday. So how do I process that and talk about it and not feel shame so that I can grow in this way?
Right. And we don't often teach or model that in Christianity. We kind of do this whole like one size fits all, and this is what it's supposed to look like. So if you just do the next right thing, which I believe we should do the next right thing, but we should know and believe that it's right. And when we don't, that's when we go, hey, God, this is where I'm struggling because I don't get it, or I don't like it, or And in my experience, and this is just me, is that I think he's big enough to handle even that.
Right. Right.
Like he 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 didn't condemn Thomas for doubting.
Mm-hmm.
He met him where he was.
Right.
So we have this freedom to come in and say, okay, something's off in my inner life, and it doesn't feel right,
Mm-hmm.
and I need some understanding. And that is a lot of what I thought, you had hit on this whole, like, this going to Christ for who we are, for our identity, that he tells us who we are, and meeting with him in that matter before we accomplish anything else.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think that's so important.
Yes. And that was new for me because I always showed up to relationships with an unsaid expectation of
Mm,
what I desired to receive from them.
wow.
If I first am grounded in Christ and my identity in him, I show up to receive what they're offering and can accept what a friend is offering. Not that there's not expectations, but they're
Right.
discussed and they're mutual,
Mm-hmm.
not and I do that. It's not even in friendship. In marriage, in parent relationships, in
Yeah.
sibling relationships, it's very easy for me to say, "Well, this is my expectation." I assumed you knew, um, and you haven't met it. Right? Let's be honest. But I think if we're first saying my identity's in Christ, therefore what I show up with is an outpouring of that, and what I want to receive from you is whatever you can offer. It looks
Right.
really different.
And I think the beauty in that is that you can literally appreciate a human being for who they are.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't feel, because when we come in with expectations, it's almost as if, at least from my point of view, is it almost feels like I'm engaging in relationship with you in order to manipulate how
Right.
it makes me feel about the relationship, or how I feel about me.
Right.
Like, and that is not, it doesn't do anybody good, because then you even doubt the relationship. I mean, even if you're the one that's pulling the strings, how do you know if the other person is genuine?
Right.
You can really come into it and appreciate that other person for what they have to offer,
Mm-hmm.
what they give, even their limitations, and going, hey, look, they're human too.
Right. And it's okay. And man, yeah, to show up and allow people to have the expectation that they're going to mess up or to fail you, to have the expectation that they're not going to have things figured out, or the expectation that they're going to need you to show them grace, are the most appropriate expectations, right? Like,
Right.
life is messy, and I you know, as I as God allows me this space that I can go to him with this brokenness and with, I don't have it figured out, I mess up regularly, and he still loves me as I am. That's where I feel like, as Christ followers, we have got to throw the gates a little wider. We like the people closest to us to be the ones that seem to have it more together, right? That seem to be like a step ahead. So we have someone leading us, which is great to have mentorship. But maybe we should throw the gates a little wider and be like, hey, actually, we want people to sit at our table and sit in our circle who feel comfortable showing up to us
Right.
broken in a mess,
Right.
instead of having it together.
Well, and that gives the opportunity for the working it out. Like, it's that working out your salvation with fear and trembling. And we're all on that course, no matter how much we want to pretend like we're super Christians.
Right. Or how much we want to pretend like we don't have a capacity to even engage in the Christian language or the
Right.
Christian community. We can still engage in relationships. But I think whether you're a Christ follower or whether you have not chosen Christ, you still have inner work to do.
Yes.
And the hope is, it's a lot easier when you have Christ and his redemption and saving grace over you, so you don't have to perform on
Right.
your own to correct that inner work. But knowing who we are at our core is just part of being human.
Right.
That's not discussed. It's not discussed openly among friends or among people.
Yeah, there's not the safety or the acceptability of saying I'm in the process.
Right.
Like I'm here. And sometimes I think those who aren't Christians are more apt to admit that
Right.
on some degree because they don't have to ever put on the pretending.
Yeah.
They don't have to. So we do kind of get caught in this catch 22. And so there's got to be this discussion somewhere along the way of saying, I'm not your God. Like, I'm not your God. And so I trust that He's big enough to handle all of what you're working out.
Right.
And I think that God God does that through the process in a lot of ways of when we are developing us in some ways.
Right.
He can lead those to himself.
So many times of how gracious God is to allow me to be a part of what he's already doing.
Oh yeah.
And I think that's the beauty of it is when he slowly peels back layers, which I think in the next couple weeks is something that I hit on in a post is God starts exposing these layers of us that if he just opened the onion, it would be so painful for
Oh
us
yeah.
to see at our core how wretched, how manipulative, how selfish, how prideful we really are. So instead, he peels back a layer and exposes that, and we can kind of process that and make it congruent to ourselves. And then he peels back another one, and we're like, oh, that kind of hurts. I didn't know that that lived there.
Right.
Let's take that and make it congruent with who God desires us to be. And as we do that process, one, it feels like it never ends. And I'm sure it doesn't, and it's not supposed to. But as you start doing internal work on yourself, I feel like I'm just so much more aware of where I fall short and where I need Christ's perfect love to step in because I don't measure up, which is the best place to be.
Right. It's like, yeah, we've said this before. Sometimes it's really good to feel small. It's
Yes,
good to feel little because then that gives me permission to just be small
right.
and let him be God.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a beautiful thing and it accomplishes God's purpose. It
Yeah,
really does. Which I think a lot of people like to think that this whole doing the inner work can build into pride or can build into like this better self. And for Christians, you do, if you're really doing the work, you grow in humility
yeah,
because you realize how limited. I mean, we really are just dust.
yeah. And it's funny because I remember I was talking to my niece who's very different than I am in personality, and she needs people to step in her life and remind her how great she is in Christ. Remind her that he sees perfection when he looks at her.
Right.
I have a pretty healthy amount of self-esteem and confidence. So
I agree. That's good.
I need people to step in and say, you need Jesus. You can't do this on your own. You need this sin exposed in you. Like, I need that because it's just both sides. And that's what's beautiful about Christ is that he is our confidence when we need confidence, and he's our humility when we need humility. And he has the capacity to be both in perfection for whoever needs it. And so I love that. I love that no matter what we bring to the table, he is our strength and weakness. It doesn't matter what the strength is
Right.
or what the weakness is, he provides the strength to the other side.
Right. And when we encounter things like what you were talking about in your blog post of the bitter and the sour
Mm-hmm.
and these things that happen, they just naturally happen because relationships are messy.
Right.
Um, then he knows exactly how to apply what we need.
Yeah.
Like he knows how to do that and work that out. And I think that's a part of how he uses relationships in general, even to teach us about himself.
Right. Thank you so much for joining us here at the French Yard. We are so glad that you chose to spend a little bit of time with us today. And we are just going to be in prayer for you as you pursue doing the inner work of knowing who you are, being congruent in your actions, in your thought process, in the words that you speak that encourage and lift each other up. And we'll see you next week.